Hello everyone, I welcome you to our 23rd webinar in a series entitled New War and Peace, organized by the editorial board of the Caucasus edition. If you are following our webinars, lately we have focused mostly on the current developments in the region. Of course, we are continue following some concerning developments, but probably it's time to a bit move on and to discuss the issues which or the products which once produced stay with us. So first of all, I mean cultural products and particular films and cinema. And today I have a pleasure to host and moderate discussions between Leon Aslanov and Togrul Abbasov. They published an article in Caucasus edition titled Conceiving Armenian-Azerbaijani Relations Through the Lens of Cinema from Perestroika until the Present Day. This article appeared in our issue, printed version in December last year, and you can download both issues from the last year on our website, and you can also access this article that was separately published on our website last week. So please access this article, read it and share. So today we will discuss the role that cinema has played in national identity construction in Armenia and Azerbaijan, but also we will try to touch upon some ways that people in the film industry in Armenia and Azerbaijan can find to cooperate and do things together and somehow maybe influence the conflict-affected relationship. Leon Aslanov is an independent researcher working on Armenian-Azerbaijani relations. He also focuses on languages, cultures, and politics of the entire South Caucasus and surrounding region. Togrul Abbasov is an Azerbaijani researcher on cinema and society, but also a documentary filmmaker himself. He is also a PhD candidate in Charles University in Prague. So, welcome, Leon. Welcome, Togrul. Once again, it's my pleasure to host these discussions, and also I really enjoyed your article. So, I wonder, why films? Why particularly these cultural products has this strong influence on national identity construction, national consciousness, but also why these cultural products are important in terms of conflict transformation.
I can start if you allow. So in any kind of national state or nation state, you have various kind of sectors working together to create national imagery, to create national connections and the national vision, whether it's regarding a conflict or in general, the image of the nation and its relationships with other nations and other states. So you have the education sector, where you're grown up being taught a certain perspective on history and culture and ideology. You even have this in, for example, the music sector, how music has to be played according to your own supposed national characteristics. You obviously have the military, one of the most obvious bastions of a nation state. And you have different elements of cultural production, one of which is cinema, known to be a form of cultural production that uses visual elements. So if we take the example of the conflict and the war, in this case, the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, you only have a very, very small proportion of the population of both countries actively involved, directly involved in the conflict. whether it's fighting in the conflict or actively being physically involved in the conflict in terms of being exposed to actual military warfare or being displaced. It's still a minority of the population. The majority of the population did not have a direct involvement or have direct exposure to the conflict. What's something that the film industry can do is create a vision where the whole nation becomes involved in this conflict. The whole nation sees the imagery of war and that they should, as citizens of their respective nation states, have an emotional attachment to the conflict and have specific opinions and views on the conflict that these films can shape through their visual imagery. And that's why I think the role of film, apart from the role of the education system, has an extremely strong emotive force that makes people feel attached to a conflict that they, as individuals or groups, might not actually be directly involved in. And a very clear case of this, it goes outside of the borders of the nation. In the Armenian case, very much so. It also affects the Armenian diaspora, which clearly is not directly involved in the conflict, apart from the very, very small numbers of volunteers who went to actually fight. And for this reason, I thought, along with my colleague Togrul, that film is a very important part of this discussion about the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict and about Armenian-Azerbaijani relations in general.
Yes, thank you, Leon. Togrul.
Yeah, I agree with Leon. Maybe we can also add that yes, in the nation constructions, in general, the cultural transformation is very important. We can see in the nationalism studies that how these cultural transformations are very important. But also here, there are some characteristics of the cinema which makes it very important from its difference from other kind of cultural productions. Because I mean, cinema is kind of a mixture of different arts. I mean, there is a narration, a representation, which we can think that coming from the literature. Also, there is a visual, which is a visual aspect, which comes from the photography, paintings, etc. Also, you hear there are sound, which it means you hear a language. It's a kind of also the language production. So it influences person in many ways, not only one way. So its effect is more than the other cultural productions. Also, the one other element of the cinema, it creates illusion. I mean, it affects imagination of us, and it means that when you watch a film, you think that it's a reality. It's the real. I mean, it's the real case, but it's most of them. It's the directors or script writers' perspective. Actually, it's their imagination that we see on the film. So this illusion that it's a real, if it's a real case or it's illusion, they make our imagination, change our imagination also. So not only the narrative itself, I mean the story itself, also what the films make us to think about some cases towards films, make it our imagination and our image in our mind very different. So in that way, the characteristics of the films that makes it more important than other cultural productions, I think, literature, paintings, etc. That's why also another characteristic of the cinema is that you can it's more accessible than from television. It comes to you. It's not necessary that you go to cinema and watch a film. It comes to your home by the television, from internet, etc. So its accessibility is much more than from the other art and cultural productions. For a theater, you have to go to theater building, but in the cinema, it's not necessary. For example, national TV can show, can screen this film in the television, and you can watch it in your home. Catch you. I mean, not only it's not the way of you intentionally go and watch a film. The film itself can catch you in some position and make you to watch it. So also makes cinema more important than other cultural productions. So that's why this is the importance of the cinema, I think, to creating both in national identity and also in your thoughts about conflict.
Yes, thank you, Togrul. It's very interesting how you described exactly how films work in terms of, like, creating this certain images in people's mind because of how effective they are in terms of creating this, because of this, kind of combination of different other cultural products in a very condensed way together. And that's exactly what you mentioned, how it accesses homes of people through different gadgets and also television. But this is what actually my question is about. So usually these movies, which are so widely promoted, advertised, supported by the government, or government-funded foundations, cinema foundations, they're usually exactly those films that reproduce the mainstream, so-called mainstream narratives, the dominant narratives, hegemonic narratives, with regards to nation, to the some important issues of the country, political issues, including the conflicts, especially when we speak about these conflicts which are affected by nationalist thinking. So that's why I wonder whether there are alternatives to this. So exactly those alternatives would be able to deconstruct this hegemonic narratives. So certain kind of alternative movies, and you describe in your article exactly those movies. So I wonder how they are able to access everyday's life of people. Do they have enough funding? How they are produced? Who fund them? And actually, are there this kind of movies? Could you give maybe some examples from both countries?
I can start again with this. So there were two films that I focused on in my research from the Armenian side of things. And I mean, so it should be important to note that both of those films were filmed before the Second War. So, of course, in the Armenian national imagination, Armenia was in a winning position. So perhaps you can argue that there was some way in which it was easier to make films that talked about peace or humanistic and universal values, although in most cases still it wasn't the case. Most films were nationalistic in character, but there were a couple of examples that we have with some differences between them as well. So one of them that I watched and kind of looked at was a film called Broken Childhood, which is about a kid who falls onto the Azerbaijani side and is being looked after by an Azerbaijani lady, and they build some relationship, at first tentative, but then they build a friendly relationship, and the director himself in interviews said that this film is meant to be about humanistic and universal values, and by the way, it's only female characters that the focus is on in that film. But also there is a one-sided element to it still, because it only refers to a massacre committed against Armenians, the Maraga massacre in 1992 during the war, the first war. It starts off in that with that scene. Starting off with the fact that Armenians were victims. It portrays it like that. So in that, it's also important to note the funder of the film from the original, from the first scene of the film. It says that it's Martik Foundation, which, if you look it up, is a quite militaristic and very nationalist foundation. The word itself in Armenian means warrior, Martik. So it's, maybe you can call it a bit contradictory that they made a film that's about universal humanistic values, but on the other hand, there were also some one-sided elements to it. But the other film, which for me also is a bit more interesting, is the film called Zemlyak, which is called Zemlyak, although it's in Armenian, it uses the Russian word Zemlyak, which means compatriot. And I don't want to spoil the plots of films, but in the basic thing is that there's a guy, Armenian guy in the war, and there is an Azerbaijani soldier who's killed, and he finds the body, and then he finds out that they are from the same town, so they are Zemlyak, and he has this like conversation with the dead body of the Azerbaijani soldier. I'm not going to ruin more of the plot apart from that, but again, the director himself said that this is a film about universal and humanistic values, and in this case, there is no kind of any obvious one-sided nature of the film. It's pretty clear that he was quite promoting a humanistic dialogue in this film, and it's also, from what I can tell, it was funded by a private entity, as far as I know, not directly connected to the government or government institutions. So yeah, these two films were quite interesting to watch. Zemlyak perhaps is more what you're looking for in terms of alternative messaging. In the Broken Childhood film, as I mentioned, there is that scene of the massacre against Armenians, and also the kind of gendered aspect that it's only women who can talk about peace or be peace lovers. Whereas in Zemlyak, the characters are all men, and it's soldiers. So it's even more difficult to imagine kind of building empathy between soldiers in such a situation, but that film quite successfully does that. And in terms of the films being shown, as far as I know, Broken Childhood has been shown in film theaters, cinemas in Armenia when it was released. But Zemlyak, interestingly, as far as I know, from what I could tell in my research, the director himself said that the film was not shown in Armenia. He from directly says it was banned. Apparently, I have no proof of this exactly, but in an interview, that's what he said. But he did not give reasons as to why this was the case. But obviously, this film was different from all the other films that have been produced inside Armenia. So there might be a clear reason as to why the film hasn't been shown in public, to the best of my knowledge. So yeah, I focused on these two films. We can go into other forms of films on social media, but we might continue that conversation a bit later. So I'll stick to these for now and move it on to Togrul.
Yes.
The films that which are not let's say continue the general narration. I focused on two films again, Yellow Bride and The Road. Both are funded by the state, actually, but it was not screened in general cinemas, but it's screened in special. There have been some special screenings of these films several times in that time. Also, but Yellow Bride especially has been screened in the abroad in several festivals, etc. But in television, in TVs, none of them has been screened, but you can find in Azerbaijan Films YouTube channel, you can find Yellow Bride. So if you want to watch, you can watch. I mean, it's not banned. There are some also newspaper articles in that period about film, etc. These films does not continue the general narration. There are some friendship, kind of friendship between the Armenian and Azerbaijani character. But these films are not known, let me say, much in Azerbaijan. I mean, apart from the people in this film industry, etc. General mass do not know these films. But in YouTube, as I said, the film uploaded in YouTube channel Yellow Bride, and I read the comments of this, the reflection of the people. Some people, there is a contradictional comment. Some people says, yes, we have to create peace, etc. Such kind of we need such kind of films, etc. But there are a lot of other comments with that why we produce such a film that try to show kind of friendship between an Armenian and Azerbaijani character. But it is, I think, it's normal. I mean, these discussions, but the state should do it and must make more people to know this film if they funded this film. But from Yellow Bright, as I understand, it is although it is approach is humanistic, but still it's a kind of maybe a cultural diplomacy. I mean, to show the because in interview with the director, he says that it is mostly produced for the abroad, festivals, but I mean, they are not known by the most of the people in Azerbaijan. They are not promote these films not promoted much by the states, but still they are there, and people can watch them. So I mean, they are not the other films which are does the general narration of the state about conflict, etc. They are promoted much more than these films, of course. They have screened in the televisions, etc. I mean, you can watch. They are promoting by the state and TV companies. So, although these films not promoting, but they are there in YouTube. You can watch them. It's the case. Yeah.
Thank you. Interesting. Actually, Togrul, again, I would like to continue from the point that you made regarding reaction to these films that you saw in the comment section in YouTube under these movies, and some of them were not really accepting this very direct, straightforward peace narrative, or like that could be considered to peace narrative regarding the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict or general Armenian-Azerbaijani relations. So I wonder how effective exactly those movies or films that would be exactly touching on this conflict or Armenian-Azerbaijani relations from this kind of conflict transformation perspective or peace perspective. Would it be so much accepted by the wider audience in both societies? Or maybe it's better to think about those movies which are not really directly addressing the conflict, but rather discussing more general issues that can be related to peace, like coexistence, humanism, anti-militarism, you name it. So what do you think about that?
I think maybe there will be some people who are not accepting it, but still it will change something in their imagination. So I mean, it's not a must that their perspective change radically from the militarist or hated perspective to the peace perspective, for example. But what such kind of films can help for peace? They can prepare people. People to think in another way, for example, because as I said before, there are a lot of films that promoting hatred or they making dehumanization to the Armenians in Azerbaijan case, etc. But these films at least break these frames and they show that we can look to the conflict towards another windows. This is the one part of the issue. And also that you mentioned, it is not must that the films should be directly take this conflict into the consideration. For example, it can be in generally humanistic, anti-war, anti-militarist films also can be helpful. I mean, films will not, of course, change totally the people, but I think people are ready generally for peace. Just they need to see these different perspectives. What kind they need to be ready for peace. I don't think that generally people will not accept such kind of films. Of course, maybe in the first film, for example, there can be more discussion or more complaints against towards such kind of. But in the second one, people will learn to approach the film in the different way. In the third one, it will change much more. But it is very related with the political issues. If politicians will support such films, their effects will be much more on the masses and nations also, I think. But if, for example, they will not support, or they will talk against these films, that for example, the director of this film is a traitor, something like that, it will not let people to see that peace window in this film. It will blockade their perspective also, people's perspective also. So the films are not directly change people, but it's very helpful instrument and tool for this, I think.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Leon, from the Armenian perspective.
Yeah, I can surely comment, not Armenian perspective, just general. So yeah, I think Togrul touched on an important point about the comments that he saw on the Saragelin film about why are you making such a film that promotes some kind of peace? People perceive that as putting your own side in a weaker position. So that's why I'm always keen to support the idea of mutuality, because these people obviously think that, look, Armenians are not doing the same thing. Why should we do this? Kind of make some peace films, or maybe they don't know that what Armenians are making or producing. So they should also know about it and learn it. Once they do learn about it, they can also feel more at ease to produce their own peace narratives. So I think if going forward, if people want to produce films either together or even separately, the idea of mutuality has to come into it. And they can be directly or indirectly related to the conflict. I get random kind of film ideas coming to my mind, which people can use based on this kind of concept of mutuality. For example, and also the concept of absurdity, like the absurdity of war in general and the conflict. Why should a 18-year-old kid go to kill another 18-year-old kid that they don't know? So you can have a film where you follow the life path of two Armenian and Azerbaijani boys who are born into their each society, and then what they see at school, what they hear people talking about. They might be from poorer backgrounds, so they're more likely then to be conscripted, not able to give bribes to skip the army, get influenced by nationalist rhetoric and ideology, feel the effects of dehumanization of the other side, to show the process of how they are prepared by the state to go and kill their peer, let's say, on the other side of the border, and to show how this process is happening on both sides, to show both the mutuality of this process and also the absurdity of this process. And if someone from either country sees such a film, they will realize that the process is more or less the same on either side, with small nuanced differences. But then they cannot make the argument that, oh, we are making a peace-based narrative in our films and they are not, because you're showing that the process is happening on both sides mutually at the same time. So I would kind of encourage a film. I'm not a filmmaker myself, but I would encourage filmmakers to take that path in the future. Obviously, the state itself, both in Armenia and Azerbaijan, is going to be extremely reluctant and probably would not support such kind of ideas, but it would be interesting to look into other ways of cooperation.
Yes, thank you, Leon. Actually, we exactly approached one important question through the discussions about joint initiatives, and actually we received a question from Nazrin Gadimova from the audience exactly about how can cinema build bridges between the society? Is there a chance to have a joint project of Armenian and Azerbaijani directors that would change the dominant nationalist narrative? And Leon already mentioned this could be one of the initiatives, just to get to learn the other side, right? So how this conflict, exactly the absurdity of the war and the suffering that this war brought to people in their everyday lives on both sides of this divide. So, but maybe you can make some more concrete suggestions how this can be done, what kind of projects this can be, and how to support them. And before you answer this question, I would like to invite audience to post more questions to the question and answers section, but also feel free to raise your hand and I can invite you to actually speak your question to the rest of the people here. Feel free to raise your hand or type a question. So, Togrul, Leon, any concrete projects?
As actually Leon mentioned, this mutual productions that show mutual suffers from the war is very important. But I can add to this that there are some such films, especially funded by the third parties, documentaries actually, but they are not known by the general agencies in the countries because these are the documentaries. Also, I think not only the making films like showing one character from Azerbaijan that suffered from the, for example, war, and another from the Armenia, making and putting together side by side and make such a film. Instead of this, this is also one way and it can be helpful, but I think the co-productions, I mean, writing, for example, script together and directing film together, that not only showing the different perspective from Azerbaijan perspective and Armenian perspective, but to trying to find the common perspective. What is the when two scriptwriters from Armenia and Azerbaijan coming together, and two directors or filmmakers coming together, they will, if they will make such a film, they will find also the common perspective, not only putting two different story together side by side. Let me say first Azerbaijan stories, and there are such films, such documentaries, but I think making a co-production can be more effective. Yes, people will, because in that case, most of the time I see the reflections like that. Okay, they are live, for example. Their story is live, for example. I mean, they, Azerbaijanis can reflect such that way to the Armenian that suffered from the war, or Armenian can reflect such to the Azerbaijani who reflect. It's a propaganda, it's a narration of the Azerbaijan side, for example. They can easily, but when they together make this common narration, a piece narration, it can be more effective than putting different perspective side by side. Trying to find a common perspective is, I think this is the much more important. Also, up to date, these films mainly was documentaries, such films, which show different perspectives. Fiction films is more influence people than documentaries, actually, because there is a narration. I mean, people like to watch fiction films more than documentaries. So this is the missing point. I mean, co-productions and fiction co-productions is the main missing point, and in the cultural approach to the conflict. And I think we should think about it, and we should find ways of how we can encourage different, especially young filmmakers, how they can come together and make films together, not side by side.
Thank you, Togrul. Leon, would you like to add something on this?
Yeah, I was going to make a comment which I think is also related to the question that we have, the next question.
You can voice it if you wish.
Shall I mention?
Sure.
Yeah, so it's about co-producing anything during times of conflict. So unfortunately, we're always tied to the political processes that are pushed forward by elite politicians, which most of us, or almost none of us, have any kind of influence over. But unfortunately, they have a disproportionate influence over us and our activities. And it's only natural that most people shy away from doing any kind of cooperative work when the elites that be are either literally declaring war or are making kind of provocative statements. So in these times, people are much more hesitant to work together. But I think there might have to be a kind of mentality shift if we're going to avoid this influence, because this influence is not going to go away anytime soon. And we don't know yet how long the conflict, in terms of its official a conflict status is going to go on for. So I think there needs to be a mentality shift in both these peace activist circles, but also in general, let's say people in the film industry who want to co-produce, to kind of take power into their own hands, as limited as that power might be, and to make these co-productions despite any of the political developments going on, but obviously always taking into account those political developments. And more often than not, you will have to co-produce with people who are on the same page as you politically and in terms of the views on the conflict. I think the most important thing is finding the people who do have those similar views on the conflict, whether it's from Armenia or Azerbaijan. Otherwise, as soon as they start co-producing anything, if one or both sides of the conflict start to make provocative statements or actions, people within that production group, some of them are going to refuse to cooperate, and the whole process will be sabotaged because of political developments. So building a strong group of people who are going to co-produce no matter what the political developments are is probably going to be the most important thing to do, rather than bringing in random people who might be good filmmakers, but at any sense of political vulnerability from a nationalist perspective, they might sabotage the process and stop cooperating because of views that they were holding before that might have been underlying. And then we saw this happen in the Second Karabakh War, when supposed peace activists ended up being nationalists. So yeah.
Thank you, Leon. Yeah, I also would like to follow up with one question, but maybe Togrul wants to add something on this question as well. So, are these peace narrations possible in times of active conflict in general?
Yes, I agree with Leon, because I just want to mention that we are talking about kind of cultural counter production. I mean, to the general to the state or the nationalist approach. So, but of course, it's not easy, but you should be strong enough to make this counter culture. I mean, the counter culture, trying to make it this counter culture or counter narrations, etc., always is difficult because there is settled cultures. I mean, here I mean settled narrations in the people. So whatever will happen on the ground, trying to continue these counter narrations and common productions is very important. I think we should continue whatever happens on the political in the political issues. Whatever happens, we should continue make this counter-cultural productions. I think that's what I mean. So there isn't any. We shouldn't think that if it is a true time or not, right time or not. I mean, there isn't any specific time for this. Every time we have to think about this and try to make these co-productions.
Yes, I do agree completely with this argument, with this point. I just wonder, since of course we cannot still rule out the possibilities or consequences of, you know, in this very delicate situation in both countries, like politically, also is not that easy to organize such co-production, especially, you know, if this co-production means that you know, to reach wider audience, so it requires a certain you know, public broadcasting, maybe on all these kind of elements, you know, to reach as much as possible the audience in order to, you know, present an alternative to the hegemonic narratives of war. And but I wonder, yeah, so we cannot really rule out certain consequences that those people who are involved in this co-production can have following their jointly produced product. So do you think that maybe considering this delicate situation, can we think about cooperation that would not require co-production as such? So I mean, there could be a joint product, or I mean, joint cooperation, but that between filmmakers on both sides, but that would not require them to produce one common film, you know, on broadcast and broadcast it on both sites. They can work maybe individually or within their own communities on one side or the other side, but of course have a certain dialogue with them, with their partners or project partners on the other side. So, but not really producing the same film, one for all.
I mean, there is a possibility of that, but I would generally support or prefer to support efforts that bring these producers together rather than separately, because the main thing that, again, I'm going to go back to this concept of mutuality. When you see that your side is producing something and the other side, people are not aware of what they are producing, then again, you get stuck in your own bubble, your own nationalist bubble, and you become exposed to attacks and criticisms because people feel that you are just you know, people in both Armenia and Azerbaijan who have been deemed to be, you know, peace builders or whatever, and they get the kind of label of traitor and things like that. They believe that, generally believe that they are actually actively trying to harm their own people, or they are self-hating people, because they only see what their activism is or their production is, but they don't see that what the other side might be producing similar things on they're on the same wavelength. So when you do this co-production thing, you become much more resilient and stronger to resist these accusations and criticisms of betrayal, of being unpatriotic in these things. So I would be hesitant to draw strict lines and make separate productions in this case.
Yeah, thank you. Togrul, do you agree?
Yeah, I totally agree. I was also talking about this. And the only case, for example, if it is not possible to make a co-production, in that case, at least if they do individual separate films in Azerbaijan and Armenia, at least then producers of these films try to make these films screened in both sides, at least. I mean, the Armenian film in Azerbaijan also, Azerbaijani film in Armenia also. And also Azerbaijani film Azerbaijan and Armenian film Armenian, because otherwise accusation start to make that we are the peaceful, we make this film, but the other side do not know. There was I have such a experience also. I screened Zemlyak in close group in Azerbaijan, and one of the spectators said that, "Oh, I didn't know that Armenians could make such a film." They don't know, for example, what Armenian filmmakers have done up to date. Maybe this is same reaction come from someone from the Armenia also when they see Yellow Bride, for example. So the co-production is important, but if it is not possible in that cases, at least co-screening should be made. I think.
Yes, good point. Good point as well. Yeah, exactly. That maybe at least this something which is possible to do in case of co-production is not really possible. Thank you. And probably we have a question, one more question that we can address today from Nona Shakhnazaryan, who raised the hand. Please, Christina, could you invite Nona to the room?
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you very much for this great, very interesting presentation. I think really this is of paramount importance, and I think what you right now were discussing is actually in anthropology. It's perfectly described through the prism of Cyprus problem by Peter Loizos, who was writing and filming lots of interesting materials and how to say, he was filming and writing about how Greek soldiers would behave with Turks, and nothing actually would come from Turkish side. And he was under terrible criticism. He was criticized why the same thing. He shouldn't do that as a patriot, as a Greek person who can't do that because it's not, it's in disharmony, it's not proportional, and this is why. And actually, the effect is exactly, it's right. The effect is that this finger pointing is actually happening, and the other side pretend that there was no atrocities from their side. This is maybe about extreme situation, but at the same time, Leon Aslanov knows perfectly well that we actually wrote an article about rescue stories. And this is the strategy which BBC was, and maybe even right now, BBC was applying. They would try to find topics that would be not conflicting for both sides. And usually this is about universal values rather than about some national or cultural ideas. And I can just name some of those topics, like virginity and marriage, sex shops, and things like that. So I think in this particular case, I think it would be really interesting to try to understand which topic at this terrible moment would be acceptable for both sides, because I always think it is so pity that when Key West happened and this Armenian-Azerbaijani conflict was only one step to gain peace, and this is how I know the result of these negotiations, that Aliyev Heydar, he returned to Azerbaijan and he understood that his society, his community, his country is not ready to. He's not the only one who can do it by volunteer decision, and this is why it's good idea to start preparing communities, societies, countries to the peace, to at least to bring to at least rudimentary trust capacity, or just peace capacity. Not the peace itself; it's too far away from it, speaking like realistically. So thank you very much for your efforts. So, because we can write million texts, and we know that one song of, I don't know, Serj Tankian, or one small video by Kim Kardashian can do much more and very quickly than folions and folions of very interesting and difficult and time-consuming and texts. This is my idea, and this is why the responsibility is great.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Nona. Thank you for your important comment. Leon Togrul, do you have something to add on this or comment?
I can make a short comment about the point on what kind of themes films can touch on that would be quite easy to actually explore and to present in both societies without actually being too sensitive. So no matter how much there is hate towards the other society in both countries, I think there are still some kind of categories that people would, I wouldn't say never, but they would be much more reluctant to kind of have strong hate and kind of insult and make any accusations. Such a category could be, knowing the culture of the region as well, the category of the mother. So I think in both societies they would see mothers losing their sons as a big loss and an innocent loss. And then no one would blame mothers of each society for the wars or the conflict. Nobody makes such kinds of accusations, or that the mother of the other side is evil. People have different targets when they want to accuse or insult or things. And we can talk about how this might be entailed with the patriarchal values of the society, etc., etc. But by taking into account the realities of the cultural values of the society as well, and the realities of the conflict itself, we can, for example, focus on this category of the innocent mother who loses their child on both sides. Which can evoke empathy, no matter how much the hatred might be for other categories of the other society. That would be one small point that I would make.
Togrul?
Yeah, I agree with Leon. Just maybe I can add that it's not must that we have these co-productions, for example, must be about directly to the conflict, for example, try to solve the conflict. It can be also the community's common problems. That co-productions also can be the beginning kind of how this, for example, war affected mothers, and such kind of a film can be made, or in general, the gender problems in both societies are very similar. For example, film eco-production showing these common problems in a co-produced film also can be the start point of this co-production. It's not must that directed to making a film that try to solve all conflict issues, etc. How will be the territorial integrity or right of the
self-determination,
etc. I mean, apart from the humanistic film about how people in commonly suffer from these issues, or in general in society, how people suffer from this political atmosphere in general, can be the start point of the making these co-productions.
Thank you. Probably it's time to wrap up our webinar for today, even though this discussion can continue, and I have another question that I would like to ask you, but maybe we will have a chance to continue these discussions in another situation, another context. Thank you so much. I'm thanking the participants in the audience and also our panelists. I would like to invite the participants to visit our website, read this article, and I need to make a warning after what Leon has said. Actually, I need to make a warning that this article contains spoilers, so please be aware about that. But at the same time, maybe first read and watch the movies, or maybe first watch the movies and then read the article, as you wish. But what is also important, please share this article with your friends, colleagues, and people you might find interested in this topic. Thank you so much. Thank you, Leon. Thank you, Togrul.
Thank you, Vadim.
Thank you. I just wanted to say, if someone in the message asked where they can watch the films, I put my email down, but it might have disappeared. I'm not sure. But I'm happy to send links of the films to people if they want to watch.
Yes, please share maybe in the chat once
I'll
again.
put my email in the chat again.
Mhm.
I'll be happy to share.
Yeah, indeed. And you can also find, of course, the names of these movies in the article, and maybe you can also search for them on your own. But please feel free to contact Leon or us as editors in the Caucasus edition, and we will be glad to provide you more information. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.